Oh, hello there, everyone. It's me, Kyle Glockner, just hanging out with my girlfriend, Rin Shima here. Hanging out in front of Mount Fuji, just sitting, having a great old time, camping, as we do in Japan, because that is where I live, after all, Japan. You do know that I moved there after graduating from the University of Akron. Yeah, it's pretty great here. I get to hang out with my favorite anime characters, do some samurai duels, eat sushi, literally every day. It is an absolute utopian paradise. But in my downtime, I do still like to watch anime, and today I want to talk about one in particular, and I talked about a little bit in fall 2019. You might remember that review. So today I'm going to be talking about Season 2 of Re:Zero. Before I begin, I do want to issue a spoiler warning. I'm going to be talking about the entire show here, including a lot of the major plot points and how they play out. I highly recommend you go into Re:Zero as blind as possible, so if you do plan on watching it, this is your final warning. With that, let's get right into it. Re:Zero Season 2 begins with a scene that technically ended Season 1 if you watch the recent director's cut. This scene shows the aftermath of Subaru saving Amelia and what happened to Krush and Rem after they parted ways with the head of the White Whale. After learning that they met two Sin archbishops who stole Krush's memories and left Rem in a comatose state, Subaru and Amelia leave for a place known as a sanctuary to meet up with Ram and Roswaal, as well as the remaining members of Arlem. From the beginning, we are thrust deeper than ever before into the lore of Re:Zero. Sometimes it felt like we learned more about the world in a single episode of Season 2 than in the entirety of Season 1. From information about the witches to different types of magic, and my personal favorite, information about the backstories of many of the characters we've known since Season 1. This is one of the main things that Season 1 left me wanting more of, lore about the world of Re:Zero. Throughout Season 1, we pretty much only learned information that was the most relevant to Subaru at the time when it was most necessary, such as the basic explanation of the royal selection and the history of the White Whale. Other than a few offhand comments that had no context, we knew next to nothing about the world of Re:Zero before Season 2. The best part is that none of it ever really felt like an info dump. It all came about naturally as the plot progressed throughout the season. I absolutely loved every second that we got more lore about the world. If you couldn't tell, I was already incredibly invested in Re:Zero throughout Season 1, so learning all of this new information drew me even further into the show and made me think so much more about the world these characters live in. But more than that, it makes Re:Zero feel more alive, if that makes sense. I'll touch on this a bit more later, but in Season 1, we really only saw things from Subaru's direct perspective, meaning the only information we got was what he saw and heard himself. In the context of the first two arcs and a decent chunk of the third arc, the circumstances didn't really allow for much exploration into the world, leaving us with what at times felt like a very flat world that Subaru and the others just so happened to be living in. But after Season 2, the world of Re:Zero has so much depth to it. Rather than feeling like a setting for a story to take place in, it feels like a world brimming with life that doesn't exist for the sole purpose of the story we're being told. That being said, we aren't done exploring what this world has to offer. In fact, we're not even close, and I'm even more excited to learn about the world than I was at the end of Season 1. Moving away from world building, I want to talk about the characters and their development over this season. Since he is our protagonist, I'll start with our main man, Natsuki Subaru. I talked a lot about Subaru's character development in my review of Season 1 and how it made him one of my favorite protagonists of all time. That sentiment not only continued in Season 2, but grew even stronger than before. Season 2 gives us more insight into Subaru's past before getting transported to this world and explains why he acts the way he does in certain situations. We get to know what goes on inside his head and learn about a lot of his insecurities about proving himself to others and living up to their expectations of him and just how much this weighs on him day in and day out. This is best shown in episode 29, which features Subaru talking to his parents in Echidna's first trial. Normally in an isekai, we know some base information about our protagonists before they were transported, reincarnated, or etc. But here we see Subaru confront the past he unwillingly left behind when he arrived in Lugnica. It's a very emotional episode that offers Subaru some closure and allows him to move forward from some of his emotional baggage. Subaru has a lot of other fantastic moments in Season 2, like the I Know Hell scene with Garfield, his argument with Roswaal when he parallels the scene in front of the Knights in episode 13, the end of episode 49 when he confronts Beatrice as the Forbidden Library and Roswaal's mansion are burning to the ground, or what is possibly my actual favorite scene from Season 2 when Subaru tells Echidna about his ability to return by death. But there's one more that I want to specifically talk about. and that's from the Witches' Tea Party in episode 38. This scene shows Subaru meeting all of the Witches of Sin, including Satella, the one responsible for giving him his ability to return by death. In this scene, Subaru is struggling to realize what this ability should mean to him and how he should or shouldn't use it. This results in Subaru trying to kill himself to avoid seeing Satella, only to find his desire to live through Carmilla, the Witch of Lust, letting him hear the voices of those he cares about, and through a healing headbutt from the Witch of Wrath Minerva. What comes next is a scene that I feel is best experienced yourself. What comes next is a scene where Subaru questions the value of his own life given his ability to die and reset the world. This scene, after episode 18, is the biggest turning point for Subaru thus far. Here, Subaru realizes that he has options other than sacrificing himself for the sake of those he cares about. He becomes willing to try to live up to Satella's wish for him to love himself, and see the value he has as a person. This scene is similar to episode 18 in the sense that much of what Subaru says and does in the second half of season 2 can be traced back to this exact moment. The Natsuki Subaru we see at the end of season 2 is nothing close to the person he was in episode 13 of season 1, and is honestly barely the same person he was at the beginning of season 2. He's now capable of standing up for himself and those he cares about without devolving into merely screaming at whoever he's arguing with. He doesn't just say whatever he thinks sounds cool in the moment, he genuinely tries to understand and level with people. And above all, he's more honest with those he cares about, rather than only saying what he thinks they want to hear from him. It's truly satisfying to see character growth of this scale from a series as long as ReZero, and I only hope it keeps up in the arcs that haven't been animated quite yet. But Subaru isn't the only character that had fantastic development this season. Nearly everyone in the main cast gets their moment in the spotlight, and some of them completely steal the show in their featured episode. I could spend all day going in depth about Ram's scene outside the trial grounds with Amelia and her battle with Roswaal, Beatrice and Roswaal's past in the Sanctuary of Echidna and Ryuzu, as well as Subaru and Beatrice's scene in the Burning Mansion, Roswaal's dependence on the Tome of Wisdom and his obsession with Echidna, as well as Otto's development throughout the season and his relationship with Subaru. But if I had to pick one other character to talk about today, it has to be Amelia. Our main heroine doesn't get much time in the spotlight in season 1 or even in the first half of season 2. Even when we did see her, we only really saw her from Subaru's perspective of her or what others told us about her. Season 2 changes that drastically by nearly raising her to second protagonist status. One of the main points season 2 focuses on is the trials of the Sanctuary. Originally, the plan is for Amelia to take on the 3 trials in order to undo the barrier that surrounds the Sanctuary, but night after night she is unable to get past the first trial. But after a push from Subaru, Amelia steals her resolve to face the trial given to her and her own forgotten past. Now, as much as I loved seeing Subaru develop as season 2 went on, I'd be lying if I said watching Amelia gain confidence in herself wasn't one of the more satisfying character moments of the arc. Amelia has lived her entire life after being released from her ice crystal, not having anyone that truly believed in her. She was constantly bogged down by trying to live up to people's expectations of her and fearing abandonment if she couldn't do so. But Subaru managed to show her that there are people who believe in her and that those people won't hate her or abandon her if she doesn't live up to her ideal version of herself. Much like how Subaru's turning points can be pinned down to episodes 18 and 38, Amelia's turning points are episodes 40 and 44. There are so many incredible Amelia moments in the second half of season 2, from her short monologue to Echidna at the start of the first trial, to her conversation with Minerva at the end of the third trial, and especially her standing up to Roswaal as he tries to interfere with her trials and Subaru's plans. While she may not have been much to write about in season 1, as of the end of season 2, Amelia is one of the strongest characters among the ReZero cast, and much like with Subaru, I am thrilled to see where her journey takes her from here. Before I move on, I want to touch on a more broad topic concerning the characters, that being the difference in perspective from season 1 and even season 2-1 to that of season 2-2. Part of what I loved about season 1 was that we saw things nearly entirely from Subaru's perspective. I can count the scenes on my hand that Subaru was not actively present for or participating in. This helped add to the mystery factor of each arc, allowing us to solve the problem along with Subaru as we both had the same amount of information about the situation. This continues for a lot of season 2-1, where we see Subaru scrambling around to figure out how to not only save the Sanctuary, but how to deal with the impending assassin attack on the mansion. But after Subaru's moment with the witches and his scene with Otto at the end of season 2-1, we get a lot more moments shown from other characters' perspectives. Whereas before, scenes like Otto and Ram stalling Garfield while Subaru talked to Amelia might have been left out and simply explained later, we now see these characters interacting with each other outside of Subaru's presence, expanding the story beyond just Subaru. Now, we don't merely have our protagonist and a horde of side characters, we have a proper cast of well-developed characters that can each carry scenes on their own. I believe this change parallels the change in Subaru's character that came about at the end of Season 2-1. Subaru accepted that he doesn't need to handle everything by himself and that he can rely on those around him to believe in him and help him with what he needs to do. The series as a whole reflects this by showing us these characters acting outside of Subaru's bubble and existing on their own. Above all, this is what made Season 2-2 just as good as it was. As much as I love Subaru, this change in storytelling resulted in some of the best episodes and scenes of the series thus far, and made me more attached to these characters than ever before. Finally, I'd like to touch on something I covered in my original review of ReZero, and that is the production of the anime itself. Now, I spent a lot of time praising the adaptation of ReZero Season 1, from its extended episodes, omitted opening and ending, etc. Well, apparently the staff must have heard that and decided to go even further for Season 2. This adaptation is one of the highest quality adaptations I have ever seen in anime. Not because of the animation quality or anything technical like that, but simply because of the sheer amount of love that is poured into this adaptation. You can just tell that White Fox went into painstaking detail to ensure that we got the highest level of quality possible for the adaptation of ReZero, which is especially impressive considering the impact COVID has had on them and the world in general. I didn't truly realize how much effort White Fox was pouring into this adaptation until someone pointed out that with the consistent 29-minute episodes we were getting, White Fox wasn't getting any ad revenue for these episodes when they aired on Japanese TV. They were using their entire allocated time slot to fill each episode with as much as they possibly could, on top of consistently high quality animation, sound design, and voice acting. Speaking of voice acting though, I'd like to give a special shout out to the various voice actors that were part of ReZero Season 2. This season has some of my favorite performances for some of these characters, namely, Satomi Arai's performance as Beatrice in episode 49, Takehito Koyasu's performance as Roswell in pretty much the entirety of Season 2-2, Rie Murakawa as Ram during her confession scene to Roswell in episode 48, Yoshitsugu Masuoka's incredible change with Juice between episodes 42 and 44, Rie Takahashi's performance as Amelia during her argument with Subaru in episode 40, as well as the insert song she sang during the end of that same episode, Maya Sakamoto's incredible monologue as Echidna in episode 37 that was recorded in one single take, and above all, the absolutely stellar performance of Yusuke Kobayashi as our protagonist, Natsuki Subaru. Yusuke Kobayashi's performance as Subaru was one of my favorite parts of Season 2. There are so many incredible scenes made even greater by the sheer amount of emotion he puts behind every single line of dialogue he records, my absolute favorite being the scene I mentioned earlier when he tells Echidna about Return by Death. Thank you, White Fox. Thank you so much for all the love and care you poured into this adaptation. Thank you for taking the time to perfect every single scene to the best of your ability and attempt to give us the highest quality adaptation of the story we could possibly have. I wouldn't want ReZero in the hands of any other studio. If we do get an announcement for Season 3, I am fully confident that White Fox will continue to give us only the highest quality product they can offer. That being said, I do have my own personal concerns regarding the future of ReZero's adaptation. Much like with Season 1, Season 2 covers much more source material than a standard light novel adaptation. In particular, this season covered the end of Volume 9 to Volume 15. And even with the omitted opening and ending, even with the maximum length episodes, even with the amazing attention to detail, there were still quite a few details left out of this adaptation. Some of which could be considered more minor omissions, such as shortening a conversation or fight scene, but it seems like there were some rather important scenes cut out from the show this time around. The ones I know of include the fact that Echidna didn't know about authorities and is not associated with the Witches cult from episode 28, the omission of the fact that Stella and the Witch of Envy are two different personalities from episode 38, which I personally feel is a very important detail that definitely should have been mentioned. A lot of information regarding the reason for Regulus's appearance in the forest in Amelia's first trial is omitted from episode 43, and finally, the fact that Echidna was able to take over Ryuzu Shima's body and essentially resurrect herself was just omitted from the ending of the arc. I'm hoping that a lot of these details are able to be reworked into later scenes, but since I'm attempting to stay completely spoiler-free for ReZero, I genuinely have no clue how each of these scenes plays into the plot further down the line. I'm going to trust that White Fox knew what they were doing when they chose to omit these seemingly very important scenes, but it does concern me nonetheless. That being said, I still believe this to be a masterpiece of an adaptation and genuinely believe that White Fox made these decisions with only the best of intentions, knowing they could make up for them down the line. All in all, I absolutely love ReZero. I could truly spend entire days gushing over each individual scene and all the different conversations the characters have, but at the end of the day, all you need to know is that this is truly a masterpiece. ReZero is a series that will give you whatever it is you want from a show. From an incredible world with deep lore to fantastic characters who have amazing chemistry and significantly grow as the show goes on, to an interesting story with twists and turns that keep you guessing at every step of the way, to fantastic production quality that makes you wonder, why can't all adaptations be as good as ReZero? It is one of my favorite series to date, and I simply cannot recommend it enough. It should stand as testament enough that in a season as stacked as Winter 2021, ReZero is my favorite show from this season. And let me tell you, there are so many shows I would love to talk about from this season alone. From that time I got reincarnated as a slime second season, immediately fixing all the problems I had with the first season, to Celsa War Code Black, somehow being 1,000 times better than the original show ever was, to Mushoku Tensei showing us one of the most beautifully animated shows of the past decade that at times I can only describe as genuinely magical, and last but not least, Wonder Egg Priority, the dark horse of this season, skyrocketing its way to my favorite new show of this season and one of my favorite original anime of all time. All of these shows are worthy enough to contend for anime of the season, but in my opinion, none of them even stand close to ReZero. ReZero Season 2 was directed by Masaharu Watanabe and animated by Studio White Fox, while the original light novel was written by Tappei Nagatsuki. If I had to choose one show to continue getting adapted, it would without a shred of doubt be ReZero. It is one of my favorite shows of all time, and I only hope that you enjoy it as much as I do. Well, gang, that's all I gotta say on ReZero here today. I've started a fire, me and my girlfriend Ring are hanging out here, and it's been great to talk to you all from here in Japan in front of Mount Fuji, where I have been for several months, going on a year now. It's just been absolutely incredible. But if you don't mind, I think me and Rin here will just get back to camping, having a good time. Maybe we'll make some dinner here.